Okay, so it looks like more people have joined. We're going to go ahead and get started. If you have any questions throughout the presentation, there's a question panel in your sidebar that you can go ahead and put those in, and then we'll answer them at the end. And if we don't get to your question, we'll be sure to send you an email directly answering them. So in this webinar, we're going to go over 6 myths about collaborative storage and how Digital Glue addresses these with the creative.space platform. So let's talk about collaborative storage. What is collaborative storage? Well, collaborative storage allows everyone on your team to collaborate in real time without interrupting their creative flow. Copying files, messing around with software, and managing your data across multiple locations all takes time away from iterating and making whatever you're working on that much better. It's something that's hard to put a dollar amount on, but when you've had it before, it's incredibly hard to go back. For the past 6 years, I've been helping customers find the right storage and media asset management solutions for their needs. For every yes we got, we also got a dozen no's. It wasn't that these customers didn't need to be able to collaborate. They did. It's just that there were barriers that made taking that next step with their team out of reach. In this webinar, I'll go through the concerns customers had and how CreativeSpace addresses these by providing an affordable solution that allows customers to connect, collaborate, and create. There are a lot of teams that have needed a collaborative storage solution, but haven't been able to get one in the past because they don't have the in-house expertise and support staff to manage it. Now, what kind of storage are we talking about here? I want to make it clear what I'm not talking about are these kinds of hard drives. The kind that you get for each production and store on a shelf and have to keep track of. What I'm talking about is an enterprise shared storage server that you connect to over your network. So what we're talking about is the difference between direct attached storage and network attached storage. Direct attached storage is only accessible by a single computer and user at a time. So each user needs their own storage in order to collaborate. Network attached storage, on the other hand, is accessible by multiple computers and users at the same time. And instead of connecting to each hard drive directly, users are all connecting to the same server. So while with direct attached storage, you have to copy files to each user's drive in order to collaborate, with network attached storage, all users are able to collaborate in real time with the same files. The issue is that these server-based storage solutions are complex, and that complex architecture comes for a good reason. It's how the systems get better performance. So in a competitive marketplace, storage companies have specialized on getting the most performance out of their systems, and this has come at the cost of user interfaces. However, in recent years, storage has become a commodity. The price of hardware is going down, but that does not mean that the systems are easier to set up or use, meaning that servers still need to be managed, and out of the box are not set it and forget it, even with free enterprise solutions. CreativeSpace solves these problems by providing storage as a managed service. When the industry shifted from tape to file-based workflows, storage technology was built around an HD infrastructure. As 4K prosumer cameras hit the market, they pushed client needs beyond the existing solutions that were available. Network-attached storage with the performance needed to play back these files simply wasn't affordable to most teams. Luckily, technology developed rapidly, but unfortunately, the CapEx budget process kept clients behind the curve with unfulfilled needs because by the time they actually purchased a system that they had budgeted for previously, it no longer met their needs. When they reached out for support for these systems, companies were too focused on sales of new systems that ongoing support was not a priority. To solve these problems, we designed CreativeSpace as a managed storage for creative service so that creative teams could get hassle-free storage. We provide an enterprise shared storage server that your entire team can collaborate on, that we proactively support with built-in alarms, so we can catch issues when the first signs start popping up, and before they affect your day-to-day work. It also includes intuitive software that's designed for creatives to simplify complex manual tasks so you don't need to use the command line for anything. And all of this is part of a single service rate that you pay monthly or annually at a price that's competitive with just the annual cost of enterprise SLAs. If you don't need as much capacity, or you want to own your system, you can get our Rogue Portable NAS, which currently comes with a free year of our managed service. The second reason I've seen teams not get a shared storage solution is because they're worried they need specialized technical knowledge to use it. Our experience is that customers really don't care about storage. All they really care about is that they get the performance they need to collaborate in real time, that anything they need to do is easy to do without any extra training. and that this balance doesn't get interrupted, meaning that there's no bottlenecks or technical issues for them to troubleshoot. In order to meet these needs, we designed Creative Space for creatives, so you can focus on being creative and let us focus on all the technical stuff. When designing our user experience, we thought about the two primary use cases that anyone would have when using our storage. First, when they're ready to actually work on things, they want frictionless access. To make this easy, we created a desktop app that allows users to mount their spaces with the click of a button and collaborate in real time. Then, when users do want to go deeper, we built a web app that allows you to access your storage, browse your files, and even copy data internally. When users want deeper control over their system, the team, system, and monitoring pages provide powerful controls and insight without requiring IT experience or knowledge of how to use a command line. To get a deeper dive and even play around with our software, be sure to reach out to the Digital Glue sales team. Getting an enterprise storage server up and running is not an easy task. Typically, customers have to pay for 1 or 2 days of an expert engineer on site who understands the nuances of setting up the hardware and software. We took the time to automate this process and even created a setup wizard. While most systems will be fully set up before shipping, the setup wizard makes it possible for anybody to set up a system in less than 15 minutes. With just these 4 screens, you can take a system from out of the box, set up your network, create an admin user account, and choose right RAID configuration for your system by comparing the different options and their trade-offs. Once again, in most cases, we'll set this up for you ahead of time and send you a PDF that tells you exactly which port to connect to and what user credentials to use. When it comes to enterprise storage, clustered systems have dominated the marketplace. This is due to the way that they scale. When organizations aren't sure how big their team is going to get and how much storage capacity they're going to need, a clustered solution has given them the freedom to grow. With clustering, performance scales by adding more chassis and more drives and replicating the data so that different users can connect to different copies of the same data. Capacity grows by adding multiple servers and spreading the data across these servers. The issue with clustered storage, though, is that you're scaling by multiplying your hardware. So on top of the capacity lost by rating, your usable capacity is a fraction of the equipment you're paying for. In addition, performance scales inefficiently because performance is still limited by the speed of your hard drives. One of the biggest arguments for clustered storage has been how it makes it easy to store unstructured data. This makes sense for large organizations with unpredictable storage needs that are unable to enforce basic folder organization. However, production data is different, and almost all productions have a highly organized folder structure that they use to organize their media. Finally, with clustered storage, you're creating a single point of failure. As the system gets bigger and bigger, it becomes harder and more expensive to manage it. First, in the cost of your support agreement, as you add hardware to your cluster, and second, on the impact to your operation, as you need to bring the system down to apply updates. Creative Space uses a next-gen architecture to provide performance without needing to cluster. With this architecture, our testing has shown that a single node with 4 SSDs provides better performance than clustered storage solutions with 144 drives. Because we're able to provide better performance without clustering, you only have to pay for what you need. This lowers the cost of entry to a shared storage solution, while still providing the option for a redundant system to allow for failover. Instead of managing one giant volume for all of your data, you can divide your productions into spaces, so that each production acts as a single virtual storage device that you can define custom access rights to. In the past, one of the main reasons to use a clustered storage solution was to get enough capacity for your production. That made sense when hard drives were 2, 4, or even 6 terabytes. However, today we're dealing with 10, 12, and 16 terabyte drives, so capacity isn't an issue. With Creative Space, we take a different approach to scaling your system. With a single controller and 3 expansion chassis, we can fit 1.5 petabytes in a single server stack, which is certainly more than enough for any production. As you need more capacity, we recommend adding additional server stacks and managing your spaces between them. While your data may be spread between multiple servers, the desktop app makes it easy for users to connect to spaces across multiple nodes. So how does Creative Space achieve this next-gen performance? With something called the adaptive replacement cache. This caching system manages data from your disk into RAM, allowing performance to scale without replicating your data. Once the data is in RAM, users can connect with better than SSD performance. The system learns from what you do to make caching smarter. By analyzing how often it has to go to disk to retrieve files, it dynamically balances two different strategies in order to decide what to remove from the cache once it gets full. With post-production applications, when you open your timeline, it sends a request to the storage for the assets you will need. Because of this, you'll notice the hard drives are barely being read from as you're playing your timeline. To spec your system properly for your team's workflow, it's all about finding the right balance of CPU, RAM, and connectivity. We monitor during the first month so we can carefully tune the system based on how users are accessing it and the file types they're using. Another reason why teams may not have gotten storage in the past is that they're worried about purchasing and managing an expensive network switch. The reasons to use a switch or router are real. In the past, network-attached storage simply wasn't able to handle the demands of video workflows. Instead, the only option was to implement a storage area network solution, or a SAN. SANs coordinate access between multiple chassis via a switch. Users connect to metadata controllers, which then connect them directly with a block storage device. Luckily, as performance has improved and prices have gone down, network-attached storage solutions have now surpassed SANs in what they can do. Probably the biggest benefit to implementing a switch is that it allows more than two computers to communicate over a single network, something that is required in some collaborative workflows, like the collaboration mode now built into DaVinci Resolve. By connecting over a local area network, you can allow multiple users to connect to each of the ports on your server. In addition, some switches allow you to install software that give you increased control over the security of your network. While there are a lot of good reasons to implement a switch, creative.space gives you flexible networking options. We've integrated a multiplex domain name server that automatically negotiates connections between direct connects and switches. This allows you to create a custom .local address that lets everyone connect to the web app and share links to spaces, folders, and files. If you don't have the budget for a network switch out of the gate, you can connect each of your users directly to the ports on the storage. This means that each user will connect on a separate network, and you'll be limited by the number of connections you have on your storage. When you are ready to implement a switch, or if you already have one, you will be able to connect everyone on the same network. However, you need to make sure that you manage your traffic properly so that you don't create any bottlenecks. The real power comes from balancing these two types of connections. If you only have a few users, it may make sense to use direct connections to access data and use a more affordable 1 gig Ethernet switch to allow users to connect to databases over the same network. We understand that not all teams have the luxury of a dedicated data center, and even when you do have one, sometimes it makes sense to keep your storage closer to your artists so that you don't have to invest as much in cabling your facility. For this reason, we partnered with Studio 8 Furniture to build custom quiet racks with furnishings that match their sit-stand workstation lineup. Right now, the unfortunate reality is that most teams, if they are still working, aren't able to work in the office, so they need some way to access their data remotely and still collaborate. The obvious solution is a cloud service. The promise of cloud storage is that it provides a central location that everyone can access to upload and download files. Review and approval platforms provide a way to get feedback from your team and clients. File delivery services give you a way to send data between systems, and backup and archival services give you a place to store your data long-term and download it again if needed. However, the cloud doesn't come without issues. In reality, what you're paying for is to store your data on someone else's server where you have no control over it. Because the cloud isn't fast enough to work off of directly, while you store your data in the cloud, in order to work on it day to day, you still have to have a copy of the data locally, which means now you're managing the same file in multiple places. On top of the cost of your internet, file transfer services also have on-demand costs. When you upload and download files to and from cloud storage, you have to pay what's called ingress and egress costs, which typically make it easy to upload and expensive to pull back down. The cloud services that many customers use, such as Dropbox, Box.com, and Google Drive, have fundamental limitations that were not designed for the demands of video workflows. Primarily, they limit the size of files you can download through the browser, without providing solid alternative options. Due to the large size of video formats and how they rely on specific folder structures, downloading the media for production through these services can be extremely time-intensive, as you have to recreate the folder structure by hand as you download files through your browser one by one. creative.space takes an entirely different approach that focuses on extending access to remote users. creative.space allows you to build your own collaboration network. You can basically make your local storage and your cloud storage the same. With the built-in MDNS, you create your own .local address that everyone can connect to and share links. You have the option to download files through the browser, mount remote spaces through the desktop app, or upload and download files with an integrated FTP server. FTP, or the File Transfer Protocol, is supported by many free apps. The FTP even uses the same users and permissions that you've already set up on your system. We believe we build a practical solution that will adapt to each customer's unique needs, taking into account workflow, affordability, and security. In addition, we're currently developing integration with archive middleware so you can keep track of your data across LTO, object, disk, and cloud storage through a single interface. Finally, the biggest reason we see why customers don't have a collaborative storage solution is that they think it's a luxury that isn't affordable for their team. So what makes storage so expensive? First off, legacy storage vendors typically developed both hardware and software in unison. This required them to lock in hardware for years at a time to make it easier to support. The side effect of this is that you're paying a premium for older technology. Because of how complex these systems are, you typically need to pay for an expert to come on site, install the system, and apply any updates and patches manually through the command line. Once you'd purchased your system and gotten it up and running, you still have additional costs. First, you have the cost of the service level agreement, or SLA, which is a percentage of the total equipment cost that you had to pay every single year in order to get reactive support. This reactive support basically only gives you the right to have someone pick up the phone or answer your email. If you have a real support issue, you'll likely have to pay to have someone come out on site to investigate the system in person and figure out the problem. If this doesn't work for your operation, then you're probably going to need to have an expert in-house to deal with the day-to-day issues. And hiring a storage expert can cost thousands of dollars a month. With Creative Space, we reduce these costs and spread them over the service lifetime. Our next-gen architecture is more efficient and hardware agnostic, so it's easy for us to adapt to new technology when it comes out, ensuring that customers are always getting the latest technology. By simplifying the storage to be easy to use, we don't need to send someone on site to install it unless customers need help setting up their networking infrastructure. With our managed service model, you get hardware and support at a price competitive to just the SLA of competitive solutions. And this doesn't even factor in the software that we include as well. On top of this, we manage the storage for you based on your security requirements, vastly reducing the burden on your existing team. We've designed a hardware lineup that makes it easy for customers to find the right solution for their needs. The Rogue provides a portable storage solution with capacities up to 64 terabytes. The Auteur starts at 120 terabytes and provides enough performance for 4K and even 8K workflows. As you need to add more users and support higher bandwidth workflows, the Auteur can be modularly upgraded with a faster CPU and more RAM. Maxing out the CPU and adding SSDs turns the Auteur into the Deus Ex. With the addition of SSDs, the Deus Ex is able to support image sequence workflows. If you need to scale these workflows, the Breathless allows you to add more than 4 SSDs. With our current pricing, you can get started on a 3-year contract for as low as $9.95 a month. Remember, this is a managed service. When looking at this pricing, you will see that even some of the higher priced solutions are cheaper than the cost of hiring a single IT person to your team. Even so, if you need less than 120 terabytes, the Rogue might be the right solution for you. The Rogue is available for a one-time purchase of $47.95 for 48 terabytes or $63.95 for 64 terabytes. The Rogue is designed for smaller teams. With 2 10 gigabit Ethernet connections and 2 more 1 gig connections, you can connect 2 to 4 users without a switch or more with one. We also include the same software with the Rogue that we include on our larger systems. And for a limited time, we're also including a free year of our managed support, so you can get a taste of our full service offering. And now the Rogue is even more affordable with 0% financing for 24 months. So you can get 48 terabytes for $199 a month or 64 terabytes for $265 a month. In this webinar, I've shown you how CreativeSpace busts these 6 myths. First, it's easy to set up and manage, so you don't need an IT department. Second, it's designed for creatives, so you don't need specialized technical knowledge. Third, it scales efficiently, so you don't need a clustered system. Fourth, it has flexible networking options, so you may not need an expensive switch. Fifth, it can be accessed locally and remotely, so you don't need a cloud service. And sixth, it's affordable, so you don't need a big budget. Let's look at the costs of purchasing a traditional CapEx storage solution and how it differs from CreativeSpace. What we're looking at is the total cost of ownership over 3 years for 120 terabytes of CapEx storage. This pricing is based on real solutions in the market and reflects the business model typically used for selling storage. As you can see, the price you would initially think you're paying for only accounts for 65% of the overall cost over 3 years. On top of the capital expense of purchasing the storage, you still have to pay 15% of that as an operational expense every year, accounting for 29% of your costs over 3 years. Just to get the system installed initially, you're looking at $2,500 for the daily cost of an engineer. If you plan to update your storage 3 times within that 3-year time period, then you should also budget for at least 3 additional days of on-site support. That brings your overall total to $192,700 over the course of 3 years. And this does not include any unexpected on-site support if something goes wrong with the system. With creative.space's next-gen architecture, we're able to provide significantly better performance for a fraction of the hardware cost. With our managed service offering and annual payments, this means your cost for an entry-level Auteur system is less than $36,000 across 3 years. Because we bundle hardware, software, and support, the only additional costs you're looking at are any on-site days you need and any additional networking equipment you might want to purchase. Even including on-site installation, your total cost of ownership over 3 years falls within the SLA cost of a traditional CapEx solution. The way we've been able to achieve these reduced costs is by innovating. We've optimized every single one of our units to provide the maximum amount of throughput with the least amount of hardware. And that's what I put together. So now we're going to open it up to questions. Hopefully some of you put some questions in. I'll go ahead and look. And if you came in late and you didn't hear at the beginning, there's a question panel in your sidebar. You should be able to go ahead and put in questions there, and we'll go ahead and answer them. We'll try to answer as many of them as we can, and if we don't get to your question, then we'll privately answer it afterwards. Okay, so we've got one question here. Well, there's 2 questions. One of them was, do we offer financing? And the financing is available for our Rogue units, which you did see in the presentation that was asked earlier on. So once again, that is $47.95 for 48 terabytes normally, and you can get that for $199 a month. And the 64 terabyte system is $63.95 normally, and you can get that for $265 a month. Also, someone asked, what is the process for upgrading your storage if you need more capacity? So the way creative.space works is it's not like a lease where you have to then, if you wanted to get a new system, you have to basically get a new lease. And the same thing would be true if you're purchasing. With a creative.space contract, you're getting a service. And so as your needs change, we basically just renegotiate the service, and then you just start, if you get more equipment, you just start paying more monthly from that point on. So we really allow you to start small and figure out what you need currently, and then only grow after you figure out you actually need to. And that also goes into kind of our process of optimizing the systems. We understand that a lot of customers, they have an issue where they need to budget up front for everything they need. And so we address those cases specifically by trying to spec the system as accurately as possible longer term. But for other customers, if you have more flexible budgeting, basically you can get a system, even our entry level system, and then we'll test it out throughout the first month. And then based on the metrics, then we can start adding more RAM, upgrading the CPU to adapt to your needs. With the way that the architecture works, it's very efficient at figuring out how to improve itself and deal with workflows. So a lot of the time when you run into situations where there's a bottleneck, when you actually go to recreate the problem, it's already fixed itself. So it's a tricky system to try to like spec right off the bat specifically for your needs, because it is able to adapt so well to so many situations. The bottlenecks you're going to run into is when you start adding lots of users all accessing or all trying to get high bandwidth formats playing in different projects. And another question here. I'm doing editing training and would like to know what device might be good. Editing training. So yeah, so the Rogue is a really great system for anybody who doesn't need higher capacities, and it is available to own. And that's actually the system that I use personally when I do color work. And it's able to handle, I mean, even 8K red footage. In those cases, typically it's actually your workstation that's going to be the bottleneck for playing back the media. So yeah, I mean, the Rogue works as a really great system for any use case. And it has 2 10 gig ports on it. And those ports, I mean, the system it's really an enterprise system that's been packed down into a mobile form factor that is scaled down for 4 drives. So it has all the enterprise server quality parts that you need to get the full performance out of those 4 drives. So internal on this system, we're getting 4,000 megabytes per second. And the bottleneck is actually those ports on the back of the unit getting out to the workstation. So you can actually get the full performance out of those two 10 gig ports and then the performance out of those two 1 gig ports. So in our testing, we found be able to get 900 megabytes per second out of those 10 gig ports, sometimes even as much as 1100 megabytes a second. So yeah, let's see. Let's see, to migrate upwards to a DSX system, is this a chassis add-on or a data copy to transition to expanded hardware? So yeah, the whole setup is basically modular. So the DSX and the Auteur have the same actual chassis, and we actually pay extra to put the backplane into the Auteur that allows you to then upgrade in the future. And one of the unique features of that unit is that the top 4 bays are U.2 bays. So they have both the normal SAS port, but they also have PCIe ports. So you can get the full 3 gigabytes a second of performance through it when you attach those SSDs. So if you're doing the SSD upgrade, then basically we're just pulling out 4 drives and then attaching or putting in the SSDs. And probably in that case, then you'd get an expansion chassis to put those hard drives back in. Otherwise, it's literally just switching out the CPU and RAM inside the same unit. Okay, let's see. Okay, so another question is, what sort of issues can you monitor and solve with your remote diagnostic? There's lots of problems we can solve. A few situations that we've actually had happen. One, we had a customer who had a lot of kind of high-end studio work. I can't really mention who, but they had a major network had a rack of equipment in their facility, and we noticed that the CPU was starting to overheat. And this was after hours. I think it was around 8 o'clock at night. And we gave them a call, and they'd actually gone home for the night already, but they sent someone over, and they found that their air conditioning had gone out. So basically, their entire facility would have gone up, and probably the next, half hour to an hour, and all of the equipment would have been fried. But they were able to get in and figure it out and save all that gear. So that's obviously very valuable. And another thing, I mean, we get all kinds of different varying levels of alarms through the system with all the built-in metrics. So sometimes it can be as simple as you're copying data at this rate. So in X number of hours, it's going to be full. So, if you are running a high-end post house and somebody at the end of the night just goes ahead and starts copying, an entire multi-terabyte, storage device overnight, and then they're going to go home, and you have someone high profile coming in the next morning, and if you just let your copy go and the whole system's filled up, it's going to start performing slower, and it's going to be a lot harder for you to adapt in that situation in order to make that customer happy. But we could give you a warning ahead of time and let you know, hey, maybe this needs to not happen, and prepare you for that. And there's lots of other kind of varying issues. One of the main things that we find, and just one of the biggest reasons why customers have support problems normally, is that there's settings that you have to set properly on your workstation in order for the networking to have the right size packets. And if you don't have the right size packet set, then it'll show drop packets. And once we start getting those alarms pretty regularly, we know to reach out to customers and see if they have those set on all their workstations. And in general, there's, for users using the monitoring dashboard, it's really easy to identify bottlenecks by looking at the users and what bandwidth they're pulling. Also, you can look at the network ports. That's a lot more accurate if you have direct attached or direct connections, because then you can actually see for each port what users are accessing. But if you're just going over a network switch, then you can see all of the users and what bandwidths they're pulling. Let's see, okay. Okay, so for enterprise access through a switch, isn't there some configuration needed? Is this done by the creative.space team or the local IT staff? So we're really flexible in how we do things. creative.space is a product from, or a service offering from Digital Glue. And so Digital Glue, we've got over 18 years of experience as a systems integrator. So, I mean, doing networking is our kind of bread and butter. It's what we've been doing for a long time. So it's really up to the customer to kind of tell us what they want to do in terms of the dynamics of the relationship. And, we can handle everything, or we can allow them to do it, but it's all basically just part of the expanded services that Digital Glue can provide. And what proactive support actions are used in the creative space products to protect the data? Is hardware redundancy required? That's a really important question. We get a lot of customers asking us, how do we back up their data? And the reality of it is that this is designed to be, either an online or nearline tier of storage. And with any storage solution, you want to make sure that you have additional backups. Netflix kind of has standardized their 3-2-1 rule, where you have 3 copies of everything in 2 different locations, or in 2 different types of storage technology, and at least one backup location. So, we recommend that you still take that approach, and that you either still have hard drives you put on shelves at the very least, or you have an LTO system, or you back up to some kind of cloud storage. That's what you want to do. So we do RAID the systems, and you can control your RAID type. Obviously, RAID 0 is not going to provide you a lot of protection, but RAID does not act the same as a backup. And we also have snapshots inside of our systems, which basically allow you to kind of make a backup. You're able to freeze your file system as a read-only copy, and then when you delete things off of the spaces, then they'll still be there for a limited period of time, and you can then go and pull them out. They can be there indefinitely or based on your expiration date. But that does provide some kind of backup in case you by mistake delete your data. But once again, it's not multiple copies of it. It's just keeping that from being deleted. So you still need to have some kind of other solution. And Digital Glue does have solutions for other tiers of storage. So we can work with you to figure out an LTO solution and some middleware as well. And that's all the questions I'm seeing here. So once I see another one pop up in a sec, I think that's going to be it. So if you are interested in continuing the conversation with us and seeing how we can find the right creative space system for your needs, you can see the contact info on the screen, and I can see a few of you have already requested that we reach out to you. So we'll be talking soon. Thanks everyone for joining.